Okay. Okay, good evening, colleagues. Welcome to the number 63 online forum hosted by the Center for Tourism Research for CATS of Hokkaido University. And tonight we are very happy to invite you to join us. And today's our topic will be the tips for writing quality research papers by Dr. Erose Sthapit. So I will introduce Dr. Erose Sthapit is a senior lecturer in the Department of Marketing, International Business and Tourism, Faculty of Business and Law at Manchester Metropolitan University, UK. And Dr. Erose is listed in the Stanford Elsevier top 2% of scientists list for the sixth time from 2021 to 2025. And Google Scholar GPS highly ranked scholar in tourism in recognition of exceptional productivity, noteworthy impact, and quality of scholarly work in the top 0.05% of the scholar in the field of tourism worldwide. And he is ranked 81 out of 9,676 authors in the field of subject of sports, leisure, and tourism.
Right, Dr. Erose is a prolific researcher and has developed a noteworthy critical mass of outputs in the field of consumer behavior in tourism that is globally recognized. He has worked with high-profile UK collaborators and a range of international collaborators, as well as enjoys a prominent standing within the field of tourism, hospitality, and leisure. He serves on the editorial boards of several international peer-reviewed journals and was appointed regional editor of Europe for International Journal of Tourism Research and associate editor for International Journal of Tourism Research, International Tourism Journal of Tourism Cities. His global recognition of research excellence is also evidenced through honorary positions at international universities and membership of research groups and professional bodies, including University of Eastern Finland.
Okay, and tonight in this special lecture, and Dr. Erose will provide valuable tips on crafting quality research papers and how to respond to reviewers' comments. I think that's also a very serious issue for a lot of PhD students. How to avoid the death rejection, right? That's the common issue. We do not really check the guideline for authors from journal webpage very carefully. And also, yeah, we are very looking forward for that. A little bit housekeeping notes. This lecture will be recorded and uploaded on the YouTube channel. You can also check with the other preferred language. And yeah, if you have any question, please in the comment below and also the question and answer box. Also, you can raise your hand after the lecture. We will have some session for Q&A. Okay, the floor is yours, Dr. Erose.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll just share the slides. Right. Are you able to see my slides? Right. Yes. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be presenting my insights during this CATS Tourism Online Forum series. And this is how I have planned for today. So I'll provide a brief introduction about myself. I'll delve into the research agenda, talking about the kind of research that we do so we can not only provide you insights, but I'm open to research collaboration. I collaborate a lot with people all around the world. So again, opening that avenue for collaboration, whether that's, I've collaborated with postgrad students. I've published a lot of research with my master's students, PhD students as well as researchers around the world. I'll also touch upon a bit of teaching interest as well as delve onto that part, because I think as a PhD student, I feel that at least something that I've learned through my experience is research does not substitute teaching. So if you go for a job interview, if they ask you about research, that's fine, but they will also ask you about teaching. So I'll touch a bit upon teaching because I think it's really, really important for PhD students early on to engage in some kind of teaching and not only spend the whole entire PhD doing just research. I think that's not enough in the current job market. Then what I'll do is I'll take a deep dive in terms of writing quality research papers. I'll give you the view from my side as associate editor, as a reviewer, as well as an author. So I'm on the, I'm on both sides. As an author, I'm on the side where I'm submitting manuscripts, but also I'm on the reviewer or also the associate editor side. So how does that look from both sides? I'll give you that perspective. I can more happily talk about some of the issues to avoid when submitting your revised drafts or when responding to reviewers' questions. Absolutely, and there'll be room for Q&A, right? So thank you for the introduction. I'll briefly go through this. There's a QR code if you want to connect with me in LinkedIn. More than happy to do that. So my name is Erose Sthapit. I'm a senior lecturer in tourism marketing. I'm also the program lead for the degree program called International Marketing Management here at the business school, the Manchester Metropolitan University Business School. We are a triple accredited business school, and I'm based at the Department of Marketing, International Business and Tourism. In terms of my academic qualification, I have a PhD in marketing, and I specialized in consumer behavior in tourism. I finished my PhD in 2018. And I've also done a master's in tourism research. I sit in different editorial boards, and I'm actually a senior section editor for a journal called Strategic Business Research. It's a Elsevier journal. I also serve as a regional editor for International Journal of Tourism Research and associate editor for International Journal of Tourism Cities. So that's a bit of a background about myself. Moving on, as it was previously mentioned, I'm listed in the top 2% researchers list by Stanford University and Elsevier for the 6th time. And in terms of my citations, it's about 5,936. I have the Google citations. And moving on, in terms of my publication track record and those papers that are under review, I think I would consider myself to be highly productive. In 2023, I published 11 articles, 2024, 19 articles, and I think last year was a super productive year for me, where I had got the opportunity and had the opportunity to collaborate and also publish my own research. I published 31 articles last year. And this year, I have 7 accepted manuscripts so far, and others are under review. Since my PhD, since starting up my PhD until now, I've published more than 100 articles, mostly in these Q&A journals. So yeah, so that's a track record of my publications so far. Now I'll talk about some of the research that I've been doing this year and trying to see if there is any synergy or collaboration that we can do and if it aligns with your research interest. So as I mentioned, I published 4 articles so far in different journals, and these topics are from different, there's a diversity of topics that I've been focusing on, whether that's destination image. My core area of research is memorable tourism experience. So that's the topic area that I'm known for. We've been doing research into, emotions and food experiences. So what are the emotions that visitors recall while having that food experience, and in terms of having a memorable experience while traveling? So what are the emotions that's recalled? The paper was published, accepted last week in Tourism Recreation Research. I'm also working with a lot of colleagues from Indonesia, where we are looking at entrepreneurship education and trying to see its impact on entrepreneurial passion and behavior. Also working with colleagues from Finland, University of Eastern Finland, where we are looking at critical success factor, knowledge management, organizational learning, and financial performance within the context of tourism, small and medium enterprises. The another paper that we did was with colleagues from Brazil, where we are actually looking at this, accessibility, accessing service quality for people with physical disabilities, and we have used the tool called Scale within that context. Another very interesting research that we did was about detox experience or digital-free trips. I think today more and more, visitors, guests are looking for that digital detox. So it was really interesting experience working with colleagues from all around the world, from UK, from China, from Australia. And we are trying to look at this concept of digital detox. So yeah, that's what we did in that paper. Another hot topic that I've been working with colleagues from different parts of the world is artificial intelligence and generative AI, and trying to see how these chatbots actually help prompt excellent customer service in tourism. So these are the topics that I published so far this year. And moving on to the topics that I did in 2025, last year I published a lot of papers last year. My rate of different topics, whether that's artificial intelligence and hotel service performance. I have a couple of PhD students also focusing on that, looking at how is it that artificial intelligence helps in service performance, not replacing humans, but more like, helping them in their day-to-day service delivery. Also did research related to impulse buying in live streaming marketing. And as I mentioned previously, my core area of research is related to memorable tourism experience. So I've looked at that from wellness perspective. I've also done a lot of research linked to perception of quality, service quality. We had another paper linked to fresh start mindset, really interesting topic, again, focusing on smart hotels as well, and pro-environmental behaviors of hotel guests. And I also had the opportunity to work with colleagues from Turkey, really interesting research about creativity flow, looking at how does the creativity flow occur and what are the different stages, and what are the themes that came up within doctoral education. So these are some of the research that I did last year. And I'll go through some of the research that I feel is really, hot topic that, it might be of interest to somebody, because I feel that there is a lot of room to collaborate. So on left-hand side, it's a research that was published in Journal of Vacation Marketing, where we actually looked at digital-free tourism experiences. As I mentioned, it's about digital detox, where actually tourists are trying to temporarily stay away from digital devices during their trip. So sometimes it can be temporary, or sometimes it can be, fully disengaging with technology while you are during your trip there, destination. So we try to see, what is it that makes this experience memorable, and what are these outcomes of these, digital-free tourism experiences. So some of the outcomes that we looked at was hedonic well-being, eudaimonic well-being, and does it actually, contribute to place attachment? If you go for a trip and you are engaging with all technology, so what actually contributes to memorability, and what is it that the after effects or the outcomes of that experience? So that's on the left-hand side, digital-free tourism experience. And on the right-hand side, there is again another extreme, that is we did a research about unmanned smart hotels, where when you check into the hotel or where you are at the accommodation, everything is supported by technology. Again, extreme case in this one, where you are constantly engaging with technology. So it's a smart hotel. So we did this study based in Flyzhou Hotel in China, trying to see, again, what makes that experience memorable. There are very few papers that I've seen so far, both in terms of digital free or detox tourism experience, and as well as unmanned smart hotel experience. So there's a lot of room to contribute to if you're interested in this research area. Again, something about how I integrate my research is really important here in Manchester Met. That it's linked to the research informed teaching. So how is it that we integrate our research that we do here with our teaching at the university? So I teach few models or courses here: tourism destination field work, understanding the customer experience. Level 7-2 modules called International Tourism Destination and Tourism and Hospitality Futures. I also supervise undergrad and postgrad students for the dissertation. So something that I do as part of my, as an academic year is, try to introduce students with the research process, trying to help them to get an understanding of what is a research aim, what are research objectives, how to identify research gaps, also helping them to identify the method that they will use in their study informed by the research questions. So I'm actually bringing in my own research into my classrooms when I'm teaching, so integrating both my research into teaching. Some pictures from my seminar classes. So it's very, very hands-on, very, very active during our seminars. Something that that's being taught in the lecture sessions are again implemented during the seminar session. So there's a lot of group activity, there's a lot of interaction. So this is just some pictures from my level 7 master students module that I teach here at Manchester Met. I also do a lot of thesis or dissertation supervision, currently supervising 5 undergrad, 3 postgrad. I have a lot of PhD completions so far, 8 PhD completions, and I'm also supervising currently 3 PhD students. I have published the studies from my students in high-ranking journals. On the right-hand side, we actually published this article in ABS3 journal, International Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management. This is actually part of a master's thesis that I had the opportunity to engage with the colleagues and the student. And here again, more research. These are all part of master's thesis that we have actually worked on, and then we have managed to publish it in high-ranking journals, whether that's Leisure Studies, Scandinavian Journal of Hospitality and Tourism. Here's again another one with a PhD student, Johanna, in Service Marketing Quarterly, focusing on service agent-driven co-created caring in chat-based customer service encounters. And on the right-hand side, it's a joint research with a PhD student that I was supervising based in Taylor's University in Malaysia. Again, as I mentioned, I'll touch a bit upon the teaching as well, because I believe that, as a PhD student, it's really, really important that, you're not only fully engaged in doing your PhD research, but you are also actively involved in doing some kind of teaching, because when you go to the job market, it's really, really important that you have this some understanding of the teaching, and they have some kind of experience, whether being a teaching assistant or doing some guest lectures. It's really, really important. As I mentioned, research does not substitute teaching, so there are individual components where you have to do both. So I've done my teacher training both from Finland, and also I've done my teacher training here in the United Kingdom at Manchester Met. And something that I've used all along is student-centered learning approach. I've combined technology, but the approach that I've used is student-centered learning. And by student-centered learning, what I mean is it's not the teacher, it's not the that's the focus of attention. It's the learners and focusing on their needs. So we use a lot of active learning tools here to engage students. So it's really, really important that the learner is the focus of the attention and not teachers. And actually, I would call myself as a facilitator in this regard to build that active learning experience for our students. there are some ways of how we engage students in this active learning, in this active learning environment. We have this multisensory loom on the left-hand side. You can see that picture. The students are actually engaging with the 4 E's of experience economy, where they get this multisensory experience. We also bring in guest lectures. We have Professor Mihalis, big name in place branding, coming for guest lectures. And I do a lot of field trips, so whether that's taking students to get a hands-on experience as part of their module. On the right-hand side on the top, that's Manchester City Stadium. And I take students also to international field trips. For example, the picture below is from a trip to Greece, where students actually do their structured observation. And that's part of the module that I teach her as tourism destination field work. Again, we are integrating technology in our classrooms. On the right-hand side, you can see students are using those VR glasses and, really engaging with the concepts that we teach them in the classrooms. So it's very, very hands-on. Right. So now I delve deeper in terms of the tips for actually writing quality research papers. My aim here is to give you top 5 tips based on my experience and as an associate editor, as reviewer, and as an author as well. So first and foremost, I think my main tip is, when you start out to do your research, it's really important that you do good research. So what does it mean by doing good research is, a research that matters. It has to have that not only theoretical implication, but it also has to have that managerial implications. So you have to answer that so what question and provide justification. So does your research matters to end users? Does it advance knowledge? Does it contribute to improving educational practices? And overall, does it contribute to the real world? So it's really, really important. My top tip is, because I get a lot of papers to review, and sometimes these papers are research for the sake of doing research. They are pretty much testing the existing scale in a new setting, and I feel that it's a bit limited. So in that case, there might be a chance that your paper is DEX rejected. Because of this limited contribution when it comes to theoretical implication or managerial implication. So my top tip is, starting out early on as a, postgrad, as a PhD student is, starting with doing, good research, looking also at the impact. What does my research contributes to? What is the impact that will have to the, to the broader real world? So that needs to be taken into consideration. That's really, really important. The second tip that I would give is, this is again very subjective. Others might have different views, but this is something that I really, really consider as an author, as a reviewer, as well as associate editor when reviewing papers, is there are 3 aspects that I consider to be really, really important in the peer review process. The first and foremost is the research gap. What is the gap that you are addressing? This might be in the case of, for example, for master's students, when I'm reviewing the introduction draft, or when I'm reading the research proposal of PhD students, or working with postdoctoral colleagues, or when I'm doing joint research with researchers from all around the world. When I'm reading that draft, something in the introduction section that I'm looking at is the research gap. Have you managed to identify that research gap? Are you addressing that gap in your study? Because many times, the research gap is very light. And that might be the very reason that for the proposal to be rejected, for the, your draft of the manuscript to be DEX rejected. So yeah, it's really, really important that you spend time to identify that research gap. And one might ask, I have students coming to me and saying that, how is it that I identify the research gap? And my answer to that question is, it's all about, spending time, and there's no shortcut to it. It's about reading. You need to read the existing literature to be able to identify what has been done and what has not been done or explored. The idea is not to reinvent the wheel and do something that's already been examined or explored, because that will lead to revising your draft of the proposal as well as the manuscript. So out of the three aspects, one of them is, as I mentioned, research gap is really important. You need to cite recent existing literature to evidence that you are aware of what is happening or what is being examined in that area that you want to, contribute to. Another aspect as an author and also as a peer reviewer that I'm looking at is the originality. What's the originality of your study? What's the novelty of your study? What is it that it contributes to the existing literature? Many times, as I mentioned, it's not about just testing an old module in a new setting. Giving that fresh perspective is really, really important. And this is something that I normally already present that in my introduction section. So it's really important that you have this, clearly stated in the introduction chapter or the introduction section of your manuscript. And another thing that I would want to see, or what I've done so far and have managed to publish a lot of articles so far, is having a solid theoretical contribution. So that section that you write in your manuscript about theoretical implications is really, really important. So I really tell my, master students, especially the PhD students that I'm supervising, is please spend a lot of time in drafting a solid, a section called theoretical contribution or theoretical implication. So it's really, really important that you revise that section throughout, have that conversation with your supervisors or the researchers that you are working with, because that's one of the most important section in your manuscript when you hand into a particular journal. So whether that's building on existing theories or refining or existing refining existing concepts or theories, that's really, really important. So as I mentioned, three aspects, others might say different, but for my perspective, I feel that research gap is really important. When you draft your introduction section, it has to be clearly stated. The originality has to be there. And then when you draft the theoretical contribution, it has to be solid. So you have to mention, normally it can be like 2 to 3 paragraphs, solid paragraphs, stating what is it that your study contributes to in terms of the existing literature. So what's your contribution? So that's my second tip. Moving on, my third tip is there has to be a clear it has to be clear in terms of what the relevance is, what's the significance, and what's the wider value of the study. So when you draft the introduction section, I have students coming up to me and saying how is it that I draft my introduction section? So when you draft your introduction section, something that I would like to see as a reviewer is, first you have the background stating the relevance or what has been done so far. After the background, we have the research gap. That is what has not been researched so far, or there is limited studies in that context. Then comes the your aim or aims and objectives, which is then followed by the justification for your study. Is your study needed in the first place? So you need to justify that, and you also need to answer the so what question. So that is how you would actually draft your introduction section. So it's really important that you reflect on that part, try to answer the question regarding the relevance, the significance, and wider value of your study. And I'm sure you have heard that from your supervisors, or mentors, saying that you need to answer the so what question. Is your study needed in the first place? So you have to take that into consideration, and it's a big question that you need to answer within that draft of the introduction section. It's not only about being informative, but it's also about being compelling and impactful when it comes to your research. So It has some examples. What's the relevance of the article to, let's say, educational practice, or what's the relevance to the real world phenomena? What's the relevance to the let's say if it is related to policy, whether that contributes to the theory or existing literature. So you have to actually identify that wider value of the study to avoid the DEX rejection. Moving on, my fourth tip is something that I highly recommend, whether that's undergrad students or whether that's postgrad students or even PhD students that are currently working on their drafts, is not doing a literature review, but something that I've been telling my students all along is you need to do a critical literature review. And they tell me, Erose, how do I distinguish between these two terms, literature review and critical literature review, and what's the difference? And I'll explain that thing to you now. Is contrary to literature review, when you talk about critical literature review, is as it states in the first bullet point, the idea is to identify and include the most relevant and significant recent research related to the topic that you are interested in, related to the topic that you are working on. And it's not just about including all research that you may feel that is relevant. Okay. So it's really important that you find, do the groundwork, do the foundational work, that you identify the most relevant and most significant recent research rather than citing whatever you find in these databases in Google Scholar. So that's one of the main distinction. When I'm reading through the, even the research gap, when I'm reading the literature review draft, I can see the distinction in these manuscripts and the proposals. So the idea is, you are discussing and evaluating this research, that there has to be that criticality, and we are not just summarizing. So it shouldn't be descriptive. That's the idea. So when you are writing that section, I always tell my, students that there has to be about, these evaluating, discussing, and there has to be the criticality aspect, and not just telling the reader that, X did this, Y did this, Z did this. That's not the idea. So there has to be that criticality and synthesizing information from variety of sources. And what this does is it helps to contextualize and justifies the proposed research questions. And something that it also does is it highlights actually the areas where new or further research is needed. So something that I tell my students is, when they start out with their research, I actually tell them do a critical literature review. That can be a systematic literature review, or doing critical literature review with a set number of studies, and which help them to identify the research gap. So this can actually be a starting point for undertaking your own research. The benefits of doing that is it provides you with solid as well as logical justification. It provides you with clear argument based on existing literature. So it actually helps you to answer that so what question. Okay. And something that it definitely helps you to do is it helps to distinguish between facts and opinions. Because many a times what I do, what I come across in manuscripts and in these PhD students' proposals is many of these sentences, they read more like subjective opinions rather than facts based on existing literature. So my answer to the answer to my students would be go back, spend solid time reading and doing a solid critical literature review, synthesizing that information, evaluating that information, and then again redrafting the literature review. So it can't be these opinions in the whole manuscript. So that's again will lead you to DEX rejection. And here are two examples of that I'm showing, trying to highlight the significance of why is it important to do critical literature review. So if you look at the figure on the left hand side on number 2, critical literature review, something that you can see that critical literature review informs the different stages of the overall research process. You can see the arrow that goes to select the research topic. It actually informs the topic that you're going to do your research on. It also informs your, developing your framework, then goes on to help you to, draft your research questions and other stages. So it's really, really important that, it has that significant role informing the different stages of the research process. On the right-hand side, you can see another figure, again taken from another research method book from Gauri et al. 2020, again talks about critical literature review. And you can see that, it informs the different stages of the research process, whether that's drafting your research problem, whether that's coming into and drafting and getting an understanding of the research design, the measurement, data, sample, even analysis. So you can see that it covers that chunk within that research process. So I'm repeating myself, but something that I highly recommend is not doing a literature review, but spending a lot of time doing a critical literature review to have a solid proposal, to have a solid manuscript, I would say. So here are the 5 steps for searching and obtaining literature. So, we'll go step by step in this regard. So, first you decide the topic, and then what you need to do is identify and note the search terms and phrases that you will do in terms of the keyword. And once you have done that, you can, utilize those keywords in the databases. Here in Manchester Met, you can use, Science Direct, Emerald Insight, Taylor and Francis are just some of the databases that you can use. Once you have done that, then you have the list of the articles. You can then, undertake your research or your search, and then, download the relevant publications. So this is, how you search and obtain literature. But I also explained to you how we actually do the, the critical literature review, the process itself. So I'll skip this. So here's the actual process of doing a critical literature review. So the first thing is you search and obtain literature, but then I've noticed in many cases with my master's students and PhD students is immediately after searching for and obtaining literature, they go on to read, note, and even reference that literature in their draft. And I tell them, okay, I think you are accelerating very fast. Hold on. I think you are missing an important component of that critical literature review. And that's actually evaluating the usefulness of that literature to your research. That's really, really important. So you need to do, follow the same process, the correct process. You can't take shortcuts in this regard. So the process starts with searching for and obtaining literature. And then what you need to do is you evaluate. It's really important that you evaluate the usefulness of that research to your own study. And only then, once you have evaluated, you are to read, you are to note, and you are to correctly reference this useful literature, and then start to draft your literature review. Okay, so next I'll explain to you how is it that you can evaluate the usefulness of this literature that you have. Okay. Right. So when you talk about, evaluating the usefulness of literature to your own research, I think the usefulness of each article or each research item will depend on your research questions. That is, again, informed by your research aims and objectives. That is, what are you doing and how are you going to do it? Basically, the research aim and objectives. And then you need to evaluate the usefulness of that publication based on 2 criteria. So you can ask these 2 questions or to yourself or interrelated aspect. The first one is relevance, as you see on the right-hand side, the green circle there. And another one is the value. So you need to evaluate based on the relevance and the value of that literature to make that judgment whether or not it's useful to you. Okay, so any item's relevance depends on the appropriateness of the research reported and the connections that you can make. Okay, that's again related to the relevance part. I'll explain more. And in terms of the value, it's actually the quality of the research that is being reported. I'll go much deeper in the next slides. So one might ask that, how is it that I evaluate the usefulness of research when it comes to relevance? So in terms of, you have let's say you have a list of literature that you want to use in your own study. Here's some of the questions that you can ask yourself in terms of evaluating the usefulness from a relevance perspective. Is the research item recent? This is really important. Besides seminal studies, something that I tell my students here is you can cite recent studies, for example, 2022 to 2026, to evidence that you know what's being researched currently. Do not cite studies from 2010, 2012, 2016, and then propose a research gap. I tell my students, please go back, read more recent literature, and draft a solid section linked to the research gap that is supported by recent existing literature. Okay, the sources that you cite should be recent. Another question that you can ask is the topic and context of the research similar to your own? Is the research referenced in other studies? Does the author contradict or support the argument that you are trying to make in your own study? And another important aspect is, what is the writer saying that is relevant to what you want to find out? Okay, so these are some of the questions that you can use from a relevance perspective to evaluate the usefulness of the, let's say, the articles that you have that you plan to use in your literature review. The second set of questions, again, relates to the value aspect. And then something, again, the question that you can ask yourself is, does the author use sound and logical arguments based on existing literature and is justified by evidence? So something that I tell my students is, do not cite websites, do not cite, these wikipedia.com, those kind of sources. Do not cite articles where it is full of opinions rather than facts based on existing literature. Okay, so the articles that you cite should have sound and logical arguments that are supported by existing literature. Again, you can ask some other questions. For example, does the authors describe theory in sufficient detail? Is the method used described clearly? Are all the steps being mentioned? Is it transparent? Does the author highlight the gaps in the current research, particularly in the introduction section? Do they offer suggestions for future research? And whether or not there is an extensive list of references at the end. Okay, so I've given you some examples of how you can assess the relevance and the value of the literature that you have. And my suggestion would be not doing literature review, but focusing on doing a critical literature review, because I feel that, it has a lot of benefits. It will definitely help you to write a solid paper, whether that's identifying a solid research gap, trying to answer the different aspects in the paper, whether that's the literature review section. So it really helps you in building that solid foundation and developing good research skills when it comes to doing literature review. Right. This is my top tip number 5, is something that I've noticed over the years is, when you start to write your proposal and when you start to write your manuscript, something that I feel, whether that's researchers from all around the world that I've been working with or PhD students, is when they come to that point of writing managerial implications and limitations and future research, they feel that, if they feel that the manuscript is done, this part is not important at all. So they actually rush into finishing that part really fast. And I tell them that, okay, please take it slow. Theoretical implications are important, but managerial implications are equally important. So, you have to have that solid section on managerial implications, giving suggestions and recommendations to practice in terms of how your research findings contribute to that or will help in terms of practicality. So that's really, really important. Do not rush. You have to write a solid paragraph, and something that I expect from authors when writing manuscripts or the colleagues that I work with is, these implications should be very practical. They have to be actionable. And something that we also do is we also provide examples. Another section that people overlook or researchers or colleagues overlook is the limitations and future research. So that section also has to be quite solid, where we are actually stating all the limitations and providing concrete suggestions for future research. That's really, really important. Please do not rush when writing these sections, because although it passes through the first round, you'll definitely get a lot of comments from the reviewers saying, you need to redraft this whole section to move to the second round. Something that I would also suggest is before you submit a manuscript to a journal, it's really important that you read the aims and scope of the target journal, because at times I get many papers to review, and then it's a tourism journal and you get all kinds of papers being sent to review, and sometimes it's hospitality, sometimes it's from a different sector. Again, it clearly indicates that they have not read the aims and scope of the target journal, so you might have a desk rejection in that regard. Another point that I would really, really highlight, and it's really, really important, I think today, in today's day and age where people are using AI, something that I would suggest is AI should be used responsibly. There has to be that using AI responsibly, and all cases of irresponsible AI and unethical practices should be avoided entirely. And I have had situations where students, the author has declared why they have used AI. For example, if they are not an native English speaker, they would probably have used to improve the clarity of the manuscript. That's it. But what I would suggest I've been suggesting my master students and the PhD students is it's the human intelligence. Okay, you can't outsource your human intelligence with artificial intelligence. You have to go there in the library, you have to spend time, you need to read, you need to discuss, you need to have that dialogue with the supervisor, and you need to be able to engage in that dialogue. It's your work. It's not the AI or AI, artificial intelligence, that's doing the work, whether that's literature review, whether that's different sections of the manuscript. So it should be avoided entirely. We do track the similarity score. So if there is high plagiarism or high, AI detection in the manuscript, it will be desk rejected. You will be getting that decision email saying that it's simply written by AI. So we will be desk rejecting this manuscript. Something that's really important is also to proofread your work. I think clarity is really important. Readability is important. So there has to be that coherence. Something that I expect and something that I also practice myself is clarity, criticality, and coherence has to be there throughout the different sections of the manuscript. My last tip when it comes to publishing quality research papers in different journals is practicing good scholarship. So it's really, really important. It's just not about writing papers and getting it published in top journals. It's also about practicing good scholarship. And what I mean by good scholarship is, if you have stated that we have done the pilot study, you have to mention, what was done as part of this pilot study, what changes were done in the questionnaire itself based on the feedback that you received. Many papers that I have received for review, they claim to do thematic analysis. And they don't even mention the steps involved in doing thematic analysis. They don't provide me the data of the coding at all. So I believe that's not practicing good scholarship. So if you have stated in a manuscript that you have done thematic analysis, you have to actually explain the steps involved in thematic analysis. How do you implement it in your own study? There has to be that evidence of coding in the appendix itself. You need to include a draft in the appendices or the table showing the demographic profile of the respondents. And another important thing that I mentioned previously is not using AI irresponsibly or unethically. because that will definitely lead to a text rejection when you submit to a journal. Some journals might even blacklist you if you keep on doing that, because they detect that it's heavily written by AI. So that is something that I would suggest to avoid entirely. Well, those were my top tips, and thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Erose. And now we welcome more questions. Totally agree about the AI part because we're also experiencing similar issues here.
True, yeah.
So just a quick question about clarifying. You mentioned about the recent papers because we are debating how we set the time period. What is the recent? 5 years, 10 years, or 3 years?
By recent, at least, yeah, I would go with 5 years. So something that I've come across, the challenge that I've had with students is, PhD students coming up to me, sending me the introduction draft with the research gaps, and the studies are from 2010, 2013. I tell them, please go back, spend your time in the library, have a look at the recent articles, let's say 2022 to 2026. I mean, if they have theory and if it's based on seminal studies, so that's perfectly fine. But for others, I would expect recent articles. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a question. So you mentioned about critical literature review. I think it's maybe as a student, they might have enough time, especially for PhD students, to do systematic literature review. Like they have to read and then research based on the models that you have actually posted just now. But what do you think about bibliometric analysis of literature? Would that be a easier or quicker start to help them into the systematic literature review? At least they would know where the trends are going, and then from there on, they could actually build a clearer research gap.
I think from my perspective, what I feel is, I feel that bibliometric analysis and the systematic literature review, for me itself, it seems more like the output, but not the input. So critical literature review is more of an approach, or let's say an input, where they are learning to actually evaluate the usefulness and value of the research. They can do the systematic literature review, that's fine. But I think the reason that I'm trying to make my students understand is there's a distinction between doing literature review and doing critical literature review. Because I'll give you one example. Like, let's imagine that I'm looking at the PhD proposal where I have a list of references, let's say 20 references, that's being only cited once in the introduction chapter. And I tell my students, okay, you have used 20 references that you have only cited in the introduction section. Were they useful to you? It clearly seems that they are not useful because you are not using them in your literature review, which I had expected to see. You normally expect those studies to appear in the literature review if you have cited them in the intro part. And then I also expect that studies to be, appearing in a section, let's say, findings and discussion, where they are engaging with the existing literature. So that's my point there, that not loading the references with irrelevant studies that you cite once and then you're not citing them at all. So I think I tell them, go to the library, spend time, read, evaluate the reference, come and have a dialogue with me that about why do you think that study is useful to you. It doesn't have to be more. I tell them, make an Excel sheet with 5 studies, send the list to me, and we will have a debate where I will ask you a couple of questions. Why is that useful to you? And I mean, the question that you asked is that, the PhD students obviously have more time than the research staff. But the point that I'm trying to make is, I tell my students, if you practice this as a PhD student, I think you can carry that when you are a researcher, lecturer, or senior lecturer. So my aim here as an academic is to help my students build solid foundation. So the foundation has to be strong. So they can, it doesn't matter even they are even full professor. I tell them that build good foundation, have good research skills that you can actually implement, and then you can also share it with others. Because if your foundation is weak, I don't think it will stay long enough. Yeah.
Just one more follow-up question. So, during my editorial work, because often some journals really care about case study, but a lot of authors really focus on their cases without developing enough theoretical contribution. So a lot of early career and young researchers always think their case study is very important. So do you have any opinion and comments about this? How to turn your case study into theory? That I think most the journal care about theories, but that's also the most difficult part.
True. I mean, something I've had students coming up to me where they have had these studies with multiple theories. Sometimes they use theory for the sake of using it, and I actually have a debate. Can you justify to me why you are using this theory, and how is this useful to you? I tell them that imagine that I'm a reviewer making an argument that, again, many people use that stimulus organism response SOR theory. And I tell them that, okay, did you just pick that up theory for the sake of, you didn't find something else, so you just want to use the theory? Have you looked at other theories? So something that I would say is theory is important, but not using it for the sake of using it and not being able to justify. Because when you get a comment from a reviewer saying that, okay, you've used SOR theory in your study, but I fail to see the justification or the value of that theory in the context of the research that you are doing. I think you have to answer to the reviewer's comments. You just can't say that my supervisor suggested it. That can't be the answer. So I tell them, read, come and have a debate with me, so that when we submit, you don't have to answer the same question again to the reviewer. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I just want to ask our audience any quick question, or anybody willing to raise their hand. There is a question coming in. It's our PhD student. Thank you very much for sharing. I would like to ask how to determine the value of the conclusion of a critical literature review, and what standards can be useful as a references. Yeah, it's back to the point, how to select articles.
I think in terms of selecting the articles, I mean, and something that I would suggest is going back to those questions that I shared about relevance and value. So, because normally what happens is they skip that whole when I showed you that drawing where they're actually reviewing literature, and immediately once they have downloaded their literature, they even cite that literature immediately. So something that I would suggest is maybe taking a step back and then trying to look at the relevance, asking those series of questions about relevance and asking those questions about value. So only then, once we have made that judgment, then you can go on to maybe, make that decision of whether or not that I will use that literature. So, yeah. So, focusing on, those questions related to relevance and value would be really, really useful.
But that need practice, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, when you do it I'm not saying, it takes, obviously, the PhD program itself is, at least in Finland where I did my PhD, I had 4 years of time. And during the first years, it was all about courses, and it was all about getting skills in terms of research methods. So I think as a PhD student who have the liberty of time in hand, I think I would, my humble suggestion or request would be practice that, because once you practice that, you can keep that process going on, and then you can even master it. So when you get into the job market as a lecturer, senior lecturer, assistant professor, it actually stays with you. So the foundation is very, very strong. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a follow-up question from what I have just now about critical literature review or systematic literature review. What do you think about the use of AI in evaluating that instead of what the students are actually supposed to do that by themselves? Because right now we have so many AI tools, like other than ChatGPT, there's so much better ones like I think even Google Scholar has Scholar Labs. There is answer.io, which I'm using right now. So what do you think?
I mean, that's a very, very that's a very relevant and important question in today's day and age, where students are using artificial intelligence. But something that I tell my colleagues or my students is, me as a researcher who is publishing numerous articles, my unique selling point or my unique aspect is I actually do not use AI in my research. So I would say that is, AI is there. I think that's the unique part. Whether it's there, whether it's not there, it doesn't make a difference to me, because I've got those solid foundations where I actually go into the library, I'm doing my critical literature review, I'm scanning through the literature. I enjoy that process. So something that I tell my students is, in the PhD, even if for a course, even for a PhD program, it's not about input and output and using AI to accelerate that process. I tell them it's not about input and output. If you want to do input and output, you can find another supervisor. But the idea of the PhD program is you need to enjoy the process. So what I do with my PhD students is I tell them, make a list. When I tell them do a critical literature review, if they send me a draft the very next day, I tell them, okay, have you done a solid work? Because I will be asking questions from those articles. So if it is AI generated, I'm sure they will not be able to answer those questions, because you actually have to spend time, you have to engage, you have to read. For example, if a PhD student has selected 5 articles, I would start with basic questions. Okay, so you have sent me these 5 articles as part of a critical literature review. Can you explain to me the methods that they have used? What's the research method that they have used? What's the sampling technique? What's the sampling technique that they have used? What about the screening questions? Did you identify any screening question? So if they have used AI, they would have no clue. Trust me, the half an hour discussion will end in 5 minutes, because they pretty much say that, I can't answer, I don't know. So what I would suggest is using AI is fine, but outsourcing human intelligence with artificial intelligence, I think it would be very, very difficult, very difficult. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Any other questions? You can also answer by live. You can raise up your hand.
As we wait for questions, I can also share some of my tips about, I think we talked about responding to the reviewers' comments. That's really, really important.
Right. Very important.
Yeah. So I can give you some of the experience that I've had in the past years. I review a lot of papers, and something that I've seen in recent years is I've seen bare minimum from some authors. So let's imagine that I've got a manuscript to review. I've provided a set of comments, and they have got a major revision. Sometimes what happens is the journal sends me the updated draft of the manuscripts. There is no track changes. There is no highlights. There is no response to reviewer comments document at all. So you can imagine what I do with those kinds of invitations is, it takes me 5 minutes. I go back to the editor. I tell them, I think the authors are not doing the bare minimum. Please send the draft back to them saying that, whenever you submit a revision to a journal, there has to be a draft called response to reviewers' questions, where you actually indicate what changes have been done. And you need to show how the changes have been done, whether it's highlights, whether it's track changes. I think that's the basic thing to avoid rejection. Because some reviewers would just say that you are wasting my time and just click reject. So it's really important that, spending that time answering those questions, showing those changes in the manuscript, it's really, really important.
Yeah, because last week I do with a colleague, he tried to explain too much to reviewers in the response to feedback, but I don't think that's the correct way and professional way to do that, right? So you basically clearly answer the question and told them what you did.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, I agree with you that, going directly to the point where you actually explain to them that, what are the changes. It's fine to disagree with some of the comments. I'm not saying that you have to agree to all the comments. You can disagree, but sometimes, there are cases where the author is being very extremely rude. So I think it's not the point of being personal with the reviewer or being rude. I think that that shouldn't be done. You can do it in a very polite manner, saying that the authors disagree or argue that so and so. So you have to give that justification in a polite manner, because you can't be rude in your response to reviewers' comments. No. Mm-hmm.
I think I don't have any follow-up question anymore. So does anybody want to add something? Or any follow-up questions? Okay, maybe we can finish today. There is one more. Thank you for your question. Do you want to read the question?
All right, so in the second question, one of the audience member asked, in good research papers, what percentage of figures, graphs, and photos are used to ensure readability and a positive impression in general?
Good question. Right. A really important question. I think I can share you my own experience. We wrote a systematic literature paper sometime back, and my professors, the co-authors in the team, were very surprised by the comment we got from a reviewer for rejecting our paper when we had received minor revision. We got minor revision, we did everything, and we got a reject decision from the editor saying there are just too many tables. And a systematic literature review is meant to have many tables. So I think something was wrong with that reviewer, but then we managed to publish it in an even higher journal than the one we submitted. My suggestion would be that it's not about the tables and the figures. It has to be there, right? I think in a qual study, there are certain things like, you have to include the table about the demographic profile of the respondents. You have to include tables, figures about the conceptual framework. There has to be tables about the hypothesis testing. So there has to be that evidence. For example, for a qual paper, I was talking about thematic analysis. You have to show this, the whole process. You have to show the evidence of coding and how you have generated the themes. Overall, my suggestion would be that, it's not about the tables and figures. It all comes down to, first thing that I mentioned is your research gap. A reviewer reading your introduction section would be very much interested in looking at whether or not you have a solid research gap. They will be looking at your originality. What's the novelty of your study? Is this study really needed in the first place? You need to justify that. Once you have done that, probably they will scan through your literature review to see if there is, as I mentioned, clarity, coherence, and criticality. So it's not just descriptive. So the literature has to have those three components. Criticality is very important. Method part has to be transparent. Whether that's qual or quan, it has to be transparent. If you have done a pilot study, give evidence of what was done during the pilot study. If you have done convenience sampling technique, you have to justify why random sampling was not done. Instead, convenience sampling was done. And then when you go on towards the theoretical implication, it has to be very solid. So my answer is, it's not just about the figures and tables. They are important, but there are these core that you have to actually, the paper has to have that. So if it doesn't have that, and no matter how many figures or tables you have, it might lead to a disk rejection. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have any further question, let me summarize some highlights of your lecture. I think the first thing, the very important thing is locating the research gap. And you can basically see the value of the quality of literature review. And you also mentioned about the very important is the contribution of theoretical building and also the originality. Then you introduced the critical literature review. And also, we are really appreciate your relevance and value usefulness chart, and I think it's very helpful. And in the end, you mentioned about the theoretical implication and the practice implication are equally important. I think this is a really very important archive for research design and also a lot of useful guidance for paper submission. Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Eros.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you very
glad to
much.
have you
Yes,
tonight. Yeah,
yes,
okay. So I will stop tonight's recording. Okay, thank you very much.
yes.